This slide hopefully looks familiar because we talked about it before. I believe in chapter 4 we had this slide as well. This is refreshing your memory as to the 3 categories of audit procedures. And we talked about those risk assessment procedures when we did chapter 4 and when we covered our audit risk model. So this is when we had to go through, we set our audit risk first, then we measure our MM, the company, and then based on that, we essentially solve for DR. Now, depending on the results of our risk assessment procedures, we are going to know how much we want to do in terms of test of controls versus substantive procedures. And that goes along with what I was talking about earlier in terms of this diagram, right? So your risk assessment procedures will hopefully inform you as to whether the controls around the different processes are reliable or not, whether they're good or bad. And hopefully you can figure that out before you go into your controlled testing, because it will save you a lot of time if you can figure it out before you actually test the controls. And usually it is possible to do that because most audits are recurring year after year after year. And so you'll probably know from last year whether or not the company's controls are effective in all the different areas. So based on whether or not I anticipate controls are going to be effective over various areas, I'll plan to either take an approach for each account of relying on controls or not relying on controls. If I rely on controls, I'm going to do a lot of control testing up front. Then I get to do less substantive procedures over the account balance at period end. If I cannot rely on controls, if controls are bad, I think it's this garbage in, garbage out scenario, then we said, okay, I'm not going to spend as much time testing controls, right? And I might even not test controls at all. And instead, what I'll do is focus all my time and energy on this year-end balance, right? Because I have no faith in this year-end balance, because I'm calling it garbage. And I think it has lots of potential material misstatements in it. I'm going to want to spend a lot of time testing it with substantive procedures. Right? So remember, substantive procedures, we talked about there being test of details and substantive analytical procedures, but they're really about balances at period end. Test of controls are really all about me testing processes throughout the year. So for both TOC and substantive procedures, the way I gather evidence for both of these is going to be with all these different types of audit evidence procedures. So in terms of inspection of records and documents, it's exactly what it sounds like, right? It's just the auditor inspecting records and documents. The main thing I want to point out here is these 2 terms, vouching and tracing. These are terms that actually pop up a lot in test questions, CPA questions, etc. So when this term vouching is used, it is almost always, I would say about 95% of the time, vouching is used to refer to tests of existence. And essentially what it means is you are going directionally from accounting records to source documents. Tracing is the opposite. If you are tracing something, it is a test of completeness, and you're going from source documents to the accounting records. So if we think back to my inventory detail that I had, if I said I was vouching items from my inventory detail, that's me going out and finding those items in the warehouse, right? I'm testing their existence. But if I'm tracing, basically the terminology would be, okay, I find the items on the warehouse floor, which is my source. I'm finding my items on the warehouse floor and I'm tracing them back to my inventory detail or my accounting record. And the reason why I'm pointing this out is these are just good vocabulary words to know. 95% of the time when you see them, they can refer to test of existence or completeness, and you may just see the word referred to in the question, but it won't use these words, existence, completeness. So these are sort of your trigger words to let you know what is going on in the question. They can kind of help ground you and know what the question's asking for and what type of answer is being looked for in the question. And this is describing inspection and observation, which are really straightforward, so I won't go over it. Inquiry, right, just talking to people. Again, very, very straightforward. Confirmations. So we know the confirmation is whenever I am obtaining evidence from a third party, generally in the form of some kind of a letter. And we talked about this idea earlier that not all confirmations are created equal. Some confirmations are more reliable than others. And the reliability of a confirmation can be impacted by a few different things. The type of respondent, the type of information, your prior experience. So let's talk about a couple examples as to how this would vary. Right, so let's consider the cash confirmation. So the cash confirmation is generally considered to be very highly reliable. So this is, as I was saying before, this is direct communication between auditor and bank, and the bank is signing off on it on a company's cash balance in a particular account and saying, yes, we confirm the company has this cash sitting there as of 12/31, and we are signing our name to it. So very, very good evidence, very reliable evidence, right? On the other end of the spectrum, let's think about consignment inventory. On one of my audit clients, they had consignment inventory out, which is when I own the inventory, I have rights to the inventory, but it's technically warehoused at somebody else's facility, another company's facility. So I don't have physical possession of it. And in these cases, a lot of times what we will do in order to validate the amount of consignment inventory out, what we can do is we can send a confirmation to whoever physically has that inventory. And we can say, hey, can you confirm that you physically have these numbers and these dollar values of inventory as of the balance sheet date. So on one of my clients, we did this. We sent out this consignment inventory confirmation, and there was a one-page letter on the front just saying, hey, sign here if you agree. And behind it was, I kid you not, about 40 pages worth of inventory detail, where it listed every single item of inventory they supposedly had, and it listed the number of all the items, the dollar value of all the items. And we weren't sending it electronically back then. We faxed this 40 pages of detail to them. So they did not have it electronically to look at. Approximately 5 minutes after we faxed all this to them, we received the return fax saying, yes, we agree with everything on that 40 pages. Great, so I could see possibly if we had sent it electronically, they could have compared the information to whatever was in their system. But it was a detail on paper that had probably the fax had just completed coming through by the time they had sent their fax back saying they agreed with it. So in that case, really not reliable or relatively low reliability, right? It's still nice that a third party is saying, yes, we agree with this information. Yes, we confirm this balance. So that aspect is still good, but you have very low confidence in that case because you kind of know that they really didn't look at the information, right? You know they didn't take it seriously. You know they just wanted us to stop bothering them. You get the idea. So these are all the different types of confirmations that we can use as auditors. Okay, so we talked about cash, AR, consignment, inventory, and we'll talk about some of these other ones during the rest of the course. You don't need to know all of them today or for this test or anything like that. So recalculation and reperformance, again, pretty straightforward. In analytical procedures, we have already talked about these quite a lot so far, but we will talk about them actually more in a few minutes. Scanning is, I would say, becoming less and less of a relevant procedure in today's day and age, because typically scanning was more relevant back when we had things on paper records and we had to look through them physically using our eyes, right? So I'm flipping through lists of cash receipts after year end to see if I see any large or unusual subsequent cash receipts to year end, right? And what could those signify? So I'm just trying to flip through them because we don't have that information electronically. Now, hopefully, definitely at most large companies, you would have that information electronically. I suppose in a lot of smaller companies, some of the stuff might still be on paper, and it might just depend on how advanced their general ledger system is.